I mean, you guys called Rogan, bro. You've been doing the same patented rants for over a decade now. How many times are you going to tell me about fucking COVID lockdowns, right? How many times are you going to tell me about how shitty wokeness is? How many times are you going to tell me about the, couple hundred comedy assassins that are the only ones doing this beautiful high art? Like, at some point, people are just like, yawn. It used to be back in the day, he would at least have he would have wild conversations. Like, he'd have on somebody who's some like MMA expert. Then he'd have on somebody who's like done every kind of mushroom drug in the world. Then he'd have on somebody who like denied HIV was real. Like, it was all over the fucking place. And so it was like, well, you never knew what was coming. Now you know what's coming. Now, no matter who he invites on, he goes right into his standard rants. And look, it's okay if you're repetitive as long as you're saying things that are true. He's not saying things.
It does seem like Joe Rogan is facing a lot of backlash from his audience because he's kind of got himself between a rock and a hard place. Joe Rogan, for the sake of ratings, I think a lot of it was chasing money, but I also think it's Joe Rogan's pathology of being a relentless competitor, of being an achiever, of knowing he has to push it harder and harder and harder because that's how he satisfies his inner drive. He has to be the best and then he has to maintain his status as the best. And he noticed what was the easiest way for him to keep growing his podcast in the aftermath of the Spotify deal? It was to lurch to the right. And he did that, and he continued to do that. And just the other day, he was licking the penis of the first $1 trillion man in the entire universe. So he's gone as far as he can go. But there are times when he realizes, oh, this isn't good, right? We talked about it on the show. He had Duncan Trussell back on. He was trying to recapture the vibes and the, way it was back in the day when people like us were fans of the Joe Rogan Experience, when normies would tune in and be like, oh, this is a cool guy. He's a comedian. I agree with like 60% of what he says, and I disagree with 40%. Most of the time, his guests are cool. Sometimes they're CIA spooks, but sometimes they're like base lefties like Abby Martin or Kyle Kulinski. So it has a mixed bag for everybody to get involved with. Now, whenever he expands out of that bubble, whenever it's not a right-wing goon, his right-wing audience starts to melt down. So he's like a snake eating the tail at this point. He can't branch out and go back into the mainstream because his right-wing audience, which are the only people that are keeping him in business. I mean, when you were going on there, what was the average? Like 8 million, 10 million views for a Rogan stream. Now it's 1 million. If it's popping, a lot of them are like 800,000. That is an insane decrease in engagement. I don't care what kind of numbers he's doing on Spotify. So he's also in the find out stage of the fuck around and find out equation. Do you think that that's all part of the same thing that you're talking about? Like, there are consequences again?
Absolutely. At some point, when you get as big as Rogan got, you start to think like you're bigger than the rules of the game. You start to think that there's something about you that's so special that people will overlook whatever like your negative qualities are. And it's just not true. So first of all, and you're still reading ads for dick pills and shit. I mean, it's just, at some point, it's just unbecoming of a man. Like, you're a little fucking whore, And like, the other thing is, he's an out of touch, rich MAGA prick. Like, that's what he is. He's just an out of touch, rich MAGA prick. And like, he's still swimming in those waters. No matter how much every now and then he'll try to retreat back to the enlightened centrism bullshit. At the end of the day, he's an out of touch, rich MAGA prick. He texts with fucking JD Vance, might even text with Donald Trump himself, the big guy himself. We know he has just a fucking streamline of billionaires, one after the other comes up, whether it's Mark Andreessen or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or whoever the fuck. There's always billionaires that are coming on to lie to his audience about how terrible the CFPB is and how shitty unions are and stuff. And like, in the end, basically his class position won out. Like, he's surrounded by billionaires, he's surrounded by MAGA assholes, and like, that's the water he swims in now. And so you're never going to see him fully turn on these people, ever. It's always going to be a steel man for the people on the right and a straw man for the people on the left. I'm covering tomorrow, he was shitting on Zoran, calling him a communist. Like, it's enough already. It's enough already. But to your point, like, yeah, it's over. It's done. Like, he's never going to have that same cultural relevance and sway that he had in the past. And what's kind of annoying is that Democrats are always too slow to catch on to what we know. So, like, back when I was telling everybody, stop yelling at Bernie for going on, back then he did have cultural relevance and sway, and he had a mixed audience. Now you got Democrats who are like, you should go on Joe Rogan. And it's like, no, you fucking shouldn't. He's like fucking Rush Limbaugh now. What's the point? So they're always behind. I need them to go ahead and catch up.
Yeah, well, Zach made a great point about the waning relevance of the Joe Rogan Experience online as far as its view count and as far as the actual podcast episode. But also, people have talked a lot about the wane of the actual Austin comedy scene itself and the mothership, and people increasingly, giving it a bad reputation because of the hackish material that's basically always on display there at any given moment. So, do you think in an attempt to save the sinking ship, not only his online presence and relevance, but also the whole scene that he kind of founded down there in Austin, do you think Joe Rogan will stoop to the level that so many of his right-wing contemporaries, such as Tucker Carlson, recently have by embracing the likes of Nick Fuentes? I was debating Zach a little bit on the show the other day saying, I don't think that Joe Rogan's going to go that far. As despicable as I find a lot of Rogan's recent output, I genuinely do find it hard to imagine him inviting on Nick Fuentes for like a friendly conversation. And obviously, we all know that Joe Rogan's not capable of having a tough debate sort of conversation. It would probably be a softball if he was to have Fuentes on. But do you think that's the road he's going to go down? Again, much like Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith and all these other fucking idiots who are supposed to be like populist Republicans, but whose audiences are actually just full of Nazis, which they're more than likely to gratify by having on King Fuentes.
I mean, you guys called Rogan becoming Christian, like doing the whole, like, oh, I go to church now, that whole bit, right? And at the time when you said that, I was like, I don't know, that's sort of a little bit of a stretch because, he's so openly, I mean, he's been openly agnostic for years, and he's always had like interesting thoughts on that topic because he wasn't tied to any particular dogma or theist perspective, etc. But I mean, now it's almost like because of that, because he was willing to say like, oh, I go to church and yada, yada, all that. It makes me think maybe like he might actually go as far as to have on Nick Fuentes or
I think he will.
with Fuentesism. I think it's I wouldn't say it's likely. I'd say it's possible because like there's clearly no bottom to the barrel. Like he's already gone so fucking low. What would stop him from going lower? And I think to your point, he's kind of in a no-win situation now because you're right. The Austin comedy scene is like a joke, even among comics. And now there's this like comedy civil war that's happening. And it is viewed as hack. Austin is viewed as hack among real comics where they say, how many times are you going to hit me with a fucking anti-trans joke, right? How many times are you going to hit me with a fucking anti-homeless joke? It just seems like that's who they are. And I don't know how he gets out of that. I don't know. He can't go back left. The best he could ever muster is going back to enlightened centrist, but everybody still knows what you are, even if you do the enlightened centrist tap dance. They still know you're right wing. Is he going to go all the way back to the left? I can't see it. So that means he's either going to stay where he is and continue to wane in relevance, or he might end up playing footsies with Fuentesism, which is on the rise, and so try to like grasp onto that movement. But at that point, that would be him really sort of conceding defeat that like, now I'm going to play second fiddle to like this gay Mexican twink in his basement who's goose stepping,
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there. Be there.